before my feet hit the ground. Some Observer Corps men I spoke to later told me I was not more than 500 feet when I jumped. I still go hot and cold when I think of that jump. Incidentally, I gained an Iron Cross that evening. In the base hospital, to which I was taken with an injured leg, I was put in a bed next to a German pilot who had been badly burned. He couldn't sleep, and he could speak English perfectly. He told me he had spent his honeymoon in this country. I lay awake talking to him. He insisted on giving me his Iron Cross, which I always carry with me now as an ascot. It was after I had returned from this spell of sick leave that I had an experience which made me angrier than anything I can remember for a long time. I was shot down by a lone bomber, a most undignified experience for a fighter pilot. It was a Dornier, and I ran into him as he was bombing shipping about 15 miles off the south coast of Wales. I shot him down all right, but as he went seaward, the rear gunner got in a burst which put 2 holes in my cylinders, and I just managed to bounce on the very edge of the cliffs near Tenby. I was knocked out in the crash, but fortunately not for long, and I leapt out of that cockpit pretty quickly when I heard the petrol sizzling on the engine. September the 11th of last year is a day I shall always remember, for it was then I was promoted to given command of the Burma Squadron of Hurricanes. The first day I took them into action was a Sunday, 4 days after my arrival. We found a big bunch of mixed bombers flying in formations of anything from 30 to 60, with escorting fighters above them. As I led my new squadron in, I saw 3 of these parties nearing London. As the boys waded into the bombers, I went for some of the fighters. I picked off an ME-110, which I shot down over Barking. And one of his pals nearly got his own back when he put a bullet through my windscreen a few inches from my head. The squadron had a bag of 5 in that first outing, and there was quite a party in the mess that night. It was soon after this show that I had one of the luckiest breaks on record. I had been ordered up in rather bad clouds and hadn't been in the air 10 minutes when I was told by radio that an enemy aircraft was near me. I hadn't finished acknowledging the information when I came out of the cloud, and there, dead in my sights, not 100 yards away, a Ju-88 was waffling contentedly along. I yelled into my telephone, "Good heavens, he's here!" pressed my gun button as I spoke, and the raider crashed near South Road. About a month later, I had 48 hours leave and flew to see my old squadron with whom I had fought over the Dunkirk beaches. I hadn't been long with them when orders came through for them to go into action. One of the flight commanders turned and said to me with a smile, "You can't lounge about here doing nothing, sir. Come up and fly with us." It seemed a good idea, so I went up in one of their planes and managed to bag a 109. But the real trouble came when I landed and wanted to claim the Hun to add to my own squadron's total. "Oh, no, you don't," said my old squadron. "You shot it down with one of our Spitfires, so it goes to our squadron total." In the end, however, we compromised by taking a half each. I'm afraid this must all sound rather like a recital of individual combats, but in reality, successful air fighting is chiefly a matter of teamwork. There's really no such thing as an air ace, or any of that nonsense. Some pilots just happen to have the luck to be in the air at the right time, and so shoot down more than others. For instance, those acting as the rear guard to a formation may seldom get a chance. But they are just as important and every bit as good as the men in the front who are notching up the victories. It's just a matter of luck. Between squadrons, of course, you get a terrific competitive spirit, but among the pilots, it is team spirit first, last, and all the time. And that goes for ground crews, and from what I have seen of their splendid work, for the workers in the aircraft factories, just as much as it does for the pilots. Of the workers in the factories, I can only speak from experience of their products, and with heartfelt gratitude for the excellence of their work. Of the airmen, I can speak from first-hand knowledge, and I could give endless examples of their courage and devotion. I vividly recall one day when my squadron landed at a station near London to refuel and rearm. While this was being done, about 20 Me-109 fighter bombers attacked the aerodrome, but our lads calmly went on with their job of getting us ready for the air again, to such good effect that we were able to catch up with and shoot down 5 of those raiders. We all know we've a pretty stiff task ahead of us, but I feel that so long as we tackle it in this spirit, the same spirit with which those courageous civilians are facing the bombing of their cities, though we may get a bit bent from time to time, we shall never be beaten.
From my last talk to you, I should like to tell you of the day on which I was shot down. Not because it was in any way remarkable, but because it has naturally enough remained clear in my memory, and is at the same time a fairly typical day in the life of a squadron. September the 3rd dawned dark and overcast, with a slight breeze ruffling the water of the estuary. Hornchurch wore its usual morning pallor of yellow fog, making visibility practically impossible. From time to time a balloon would poke its head grotesquely through the mist as though looking for possible victims, before falling back again like some tired monster. We came out onto the tarmac at about 8 o'clock to find that during the night our machines had been moved from the dispersal point over to the hangars, while all the machine tools, oil and general equipment had been left on the far side of the aerodrome. I was seriously worried, as after a recent bombing ordeal my plane had been fitted out with a brand new hood. This hood unfortunately wouldn't open, and with a depleted ground staff and no tools I began to fear it never would. But miraculously Uncle George, our squadron leader, produced a lorry and 3 men, who quickly returned with a large file and some lubricating oil. Whereupon the corporal fitter and I set upon the hood with a fury of haste, taking it turn by turn to fire and oil and fire until at last the hood began to move, but agonizingly slowly. By 10 o'clock, when the mist had cleared and the sun was blazing out of a clear sky, it was still sticking firmly halfway along the groove. At 10:15, what I'd feared for the last hour happened. Down the tannoy came the emotionless voice of the controller. 603 Squadron, take off from patrol base. You will receive further orders in the air. 603 Squadron, take off as quickly as you can, please. As I pressed the starter and the engine roared into life, the corporal stepped back and crossed his fingers significantly. I felt the usual sick feeling in the pit of the stomach, as though I were about to row a race, and then I was too busy getting into position to feel anything. Uncle George in the leading section took off in a cloud of dust. Brian Carberry looked across and put up his thumbs. I nodded and opened up to take off for the last time from Hornchurch. I was flying number 3 in Brown's section, with Stapleton on the right. The 3rd section consisted of only 2 machines, so that our squadron strength was 8. We headed southeast, climbing all out on a steady course. At about 12,000 feet we came up through the clouds, and looking down I saw them spread out below me like layers of whipped cream. The sun was brilliant and made it difficult to see even the next plane when turning. I was peering anxiously ahead as the controller had given us warning of at least 50 enemy fighters approaching very high. When we did first sight them, nobody shouted, as I think everyone saw them at the same moment. They must have been 500 to 1,000 feet above us, and coming straight on like a huge swarm of locusts. I remember cursing and automatically going into line astern. The next moment we were in among them, and it was each man for himself. As soon as they saw us, they spread out and dived, and the next 10 minutes was a blur of twisting machines and tracer bullets. One Messerschmitt went down the sheet of flames on my right, and a Spitfire hurtled past in a half row. I was weaving and turning in a desperate attempt to gain height, with the machine practically hanging on the air screw. Then, just below me, and to my left, I saw what I'd been praying for. The Messerschmitt climbing and away from the sun. I closed in 200 yards, and from slightly to one side, gave him a 2-second burst. Fabric ripped off the wing and black smoke poured from the engine, but he didn't go down. Like a fool, I didn't break away, but put in another 3-second burst. Red flame shot upwards and he spiraled out of sight. At that moment, I felt a terrific explosion which knocked the control stick from my hand, and the whole machine quivered like a stricken animal. In a second, the cockpit was a mass of flame. I reached up to open the hood. It wouldn't move. I tore off my straps and managed to force it back. But this took time, and when I dropped back into the seat and reached for the stick in an effort to turn the plane onto its back, the heat was so intense that I could feel myself going. I remember thinking, so this is it, and putting both my hands up to my eyes. Then I passed out. I regained consciousness free of the machine and falling rapidly. I pulled the ripcord of my parachute and checked my descent with a jerk. Looking down, I saw that my left trouser leg was burnt off, that I was going to fall into the sea, and that the English coast was deplorably far away. About 20 feet above the water, I attempted to undo my parachute, failed, and flopped into the sea with it billowing around me. The water was not unwarm, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that my life jacket kept me afloat. I looked at my watch. It was not there. Then for the first time I noticed how burnt my hands were. Down to the wrist the skin was dead white and hung in shreds. I felt faintly sick from the smell of burnt flesh. By closing one eye I could see my lips jutting out like Michelin tires, while the side of my parachute harness was particularly painful, so that I guessed my right hip was burned. I made a further attempt to undo the harness, but owing to the pain in my hands soon desisted. Instead, I lay back and reviewed my position. I was a long way from land. My hands were burnt, and so, judging from the pain of the sun, was my face. It was unlikely that anyone on shore had seen me come down, and even more unlikely that a ship would come by. I could float for possibly 4 hours in my life jacket. I began to feel that I was perhaps premature in considering myself lucky to have escaped from the machine. After about half an hour, my teeth started chattering, and to quieten them, I kept up a regular tuneless chant, varying it from time to time with calls for help. There can be few more futile pastimes than yelling for help, alone in the North Sea with a solitary seagull for company. Yet it gave me a certain melancholy satisfaction, for I had once written a short story in which the hero, falling from a liner, had done just this. It was rejected. The water now seemed much colder, and I noticed with surprise that the sun had gone in, though my face was still burning. I looked down at my hands, and not seeing them, realized that I had gone blind. So I was going to die. It came to me like that. I was going to die, and oddly enough, I was not afraid. This realization came as a surprise to me. The manner of my approaching demise appalled and horrified me, but the actual vision of death left me unmoved. I felt only a profound curiosity and a sense of satisfaction that within a few minutes, or a few hours, I was to discover the answer to the question civilization had never solved. I decided it should be in a few minutes. I had no qualms about hurrying things along a bit, and reaching up, I managed to unscrew the valve of my life jacket. The air escaped in a rush, and my head went underwater. It is said by people all but dead from the sea that drowning is a pleasant death. I didn't find it so. I swallowed a large quantity of water before my head came up again, but derived little satisfaction from it. I tried again, to find that I couldn't get my face under. I was so enmeshed in my parachute that I couldn't move. For the next 10 minutes, I tore my hands to ribbons on the spring release catch. It was stuck fast. I lay back exhausted, and then I started to laugh. I was probably hysterical, but my grand gesture of suicide, being so oddly thwarted, struck me as grotesque. Goethe once wrote as a young man that no one, unless he had led the full life and realized himself completely, had the right to take his own life. Providence seemed determined that I should not incur the great man's displeasure. It has often been said that a dying man relives his whole life in one rapid kaleidoscope. I merely thought rather gloomily of the squadron returning, of my mother at home, and of the few people who had missed me. Outside my family, I could count those on the fingers of one hand. What did gratify me enormously was to find that I indulged in no frantic abasement or prayers to the Almighty. It is an old jibe by God-fearing Christians that the irreligious always change their tune when about to die. I was pleased to be able to prove them wrong. Faced with an indeterminate period of waiting, I began to feel depressingly lonely and sought for some means to take my mind off my plight. Knowing that I must soon become delirious, I attempted to hasten the process by encouraging my mind to wander vaguely and aimlessly, and I experienced a certain peace. Then I forced myself to think of something concrete and found that I was still only too lucid. I went on doing this with varying success until I was picked up. I remember hearing somebody shout, as if in a dream. It seemed so far away and quite unconnected with me. Then, willing arms were dragging me over the side. My parachute was taken off, and with such ease. A brandy flask was pushed between my lips. A voice said, "Okay, it's Joe." One of ours and still kicking, and I was safe. I was neither relieved nor angry. I was past caring. It was to the Margate lifeboat that I owed my rescue. Watchers on the coast had seen me come down, and for 3 hours they'd been searching for me. Owing to wrong directions, they were just giving up and turning back for land, when, ironically enough, one of them saw my parachute. They were then 15 miles east of Margate, and I had been in the sea 3.5 hours. While in the water, I had been numb and felt very little pain. Now that I began to thaw out, the agony was such that I could have cried out. The good fellows made me as comfortable as possible, put up some sort of awning to keep the sun from my face, and phoned through for a doctor. After what seemed an eternity, we reached the shore. I was put into an ambulance and driven rapidly to hospital. Through all this, I was quite conscious, though unable to see. Arrived at the hospital, they cut off my uniform. I gave the requisite information to a nurse about my next of kin, and then, to my infinite relief, thought a hypodermic syringe pushed into my arm. I can't help feeling that perhaps a good epitaph for me would be that verse of Verlaine's. Tout que son patrie et son roi, et très brave ne l'est en guerre. J'ai voulu mourir à la guerre. La mort n'a pas voulu de moi.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. All our hearts go out to the fighter pilots whose brilliant actions we see with our own eyes day after day. I hope, indeed I pray, that we shall not be found unworthy of our victory if after toil and tribulation it is granted to us. For the rest, we have to gain the victory. That is our task.
When war broke out, I had been in the RAF for some 4 years and was delighted when I was posted as a flight commander to a new Spitfire squadron which had just been formed. We put in some pretty intensive training, and long before the spring of 1940 arrived, we were right up to the mark and ready to go. Our first combat chanced to be with a large formation of Me-109s, Nazi single-seater fighters. It took place over the coast of North Belgium in May last year, and the first thing I noticed after we had closed with them was the air seemed to be full of planes milling around. I singled one out and was lucky enough to shoot him down in a wood near Saint-Omer. On that first meeting, the squadron shot down 11 Huns for the loss of one of our pilots, who had crash-landed on the beach. That wood near Saint-Omer will be one of the first places I shall visit when we have won the war, because while out on our second patrol that same afternoon, I shot down 2 Me-110s right alongside it. I had picked the first one out of a large bunch covering a bunch of Ju-87s which were dive bombing the harbour, and I forced him to crash land alongside the wreckage of my morning Me-109. Incidentally, the pilot of that Me-110 very nearly put an early end to my fighting career with nothing more than a pistol. I had circled him very low to make sure he had crashed when he stepped out of the cockpit, apparently unheard, and took a pot shot at me with his pistol. It was either wizard shooting or the world's biggest fluke, for that shot went through my windscreen within an inch or two of my head. I turned quickly and dealt with him, and as I did so, I saw that another 110 had been snooping along behind me over the treetops. He opened up with cannon fire and put a shell through my fuselage, and I did a tight turn, squirted at him with what ammunition I had left, and he went down to crash alongside his 2 friends. As you can imagine, I was pretty bucked with that bag of 3 for my first day in action, and a couple of Dornier 17s the next day, and another of the same type on the third day, made me quite a lot happier. The second 3 were bagged over the Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne area, and the last affair was a regular shooting match. I remember I arrived back at my base with no oil, no glyco, and the sliding hood and side door of my Spitfire shot away. I had a cannon shot through the tail, which left only 2 inches play on the elevators with which to land, and I had no flaps, no brakes, and a flat tire. I did somehow manage to put it down, all right, and as I finished my landing run, the engine seized up. That Spitfire was too shot up and damaged to fly again, but I was lucky enough to escape with only a slight wound in the thigh, caused by a bit of metal flying off the rudder bar. I was fit again within a few days, and early on the morning of the first day I was back, 9 of us came upon a bunch of high-control bombers with a high escort of about 50 Me-109 fighters. I think pretty well all of us had picked off one of the Hun bombers each before down came the fighters. A few minutes later, we had to try and make our way home because both petrol and ammunition were getting short. I was in a bit of a spot by then with 6 Me-109s after me, but luckily I found a nice big friendly cloud in which I was able to turn and shoot down one of my pursuers into the sea with what ammunition I had left. Then I popped back into the cloud and arrived home with only 5 gallons of petrol left and 5 shell holes in my Spitfire. All the boys home safely was the entry in my logbook after that little affair. When the hectic days of Dunkirk had ended, the squadron was sent into a quiet sector to rest and reorganize, and I remember a particularly enjoyable incident which happened one morning around the middle of August. Up at 15,000 feet over Cardiff, I picked up 3 Ju-88s which were heading as if for Ireland. My stern attacks didn't seem to make the slightest impression on them, so I headed past them, turned, and carried out head-on attacks. That worked all right, but by the time I had accounted for 2 of them, the third had disappeared in the clouds. A few days later, when I was on my way to an aerodrome to get some of the holes in my Spitfire patched up, I struck the first of the big daylight blitzes on the south coast and ran into a couple of Ju-88s off Beachy Head. I chased one of them about 35 miles out to sea before I shot him down. By that time, we were right down on the water, and as I turned and climbed, the other Hun opened fire at me with his cannon. He shot my oil and glycol tanks away and part of my propeller, which caused excessive engine vibration. I climbed for all I was worth and pushed the engine flat out. Very soon it was on fire, but even so, it got me back 60 miles before it went up in smoke and I had to bail out. I was smothered in oil and couldn't see a thing. Perhaps it was just as well, for if I'd realized I was only a few hundred feet out, I'd probably never have had the nerve to jump. As it was, my chute opened with a bump, and a second or so before my feet hit the ground. Some observer corps men I spoke to later told me I was not more than 500 feet when I jumped. I still go hot and cold when I think of that jump. Incidentally, I gained an Iron Cross that evening in the base hospital, to which I was